Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Fanalysis, Star Wars. Today we're covering Labyrinth of Evil Part 3. I am Retty 4, this is Evan Nova 95.
Hello.
This is Jen Sarai 1.
I will not cower in the face of this treacherous attack.
And this is Grey Jedi 91.
Hey guys.
Not 95. Yeah.
There'll be context for that later.
There will be context for that later. But yeah, Matt, why don't you take us away with the context of what we're doing today?
All right, so we are finishing up our review of Labyrinth of Evil, the novel by James Luceno, the first book in the Dark Lord trilogy. This is part 3, the final part, where really, normally I would insert a summary here, but we're going to be going really in depth with this one event. This part of the book spans the Battle of Coruscant. So that's what we're talking about. This is the part of the book that most obviously sort of overlaps, contradicts, whatever, doesn't live in perfect harmony with the third season of the microseries. But we're going to be talking about this version, of course, because we already talked about the microseries. So taking us away with Chapter 39, Calland.
Yeah, so Chapter 39 opens us up with Dooku and his half-scoffing, half-respecting of the Anakin Obi-Wan duo as they reach him on Tyth. It's an interesting example of his musings because, again, it opens up with the kind of contradictory idea and mindset he has because he does respect these two. You can see that, but it's a begrudging respect because of what he knows about, you know, the heights they've reached not accessing the dark side. And he's always trying to think, you know, I need to be on the dark side. I need to do it because of these reasons. And whenever he starts doubting himself, these two turn up and, you know, throw his logic in his face.
Well, I mean, he is always loath to admit when someone's catching up to him in any form, not just strength, but reputation, wealth, ability, knowledge, everything.
Exactly.
He can't handle not being number one.
And the funny thing, he's so astute, and so he generally does know what he's talking about. But so like there's this weird contradictory aspect of his personality that is to contend with anything that ruptures his ability to continue wishful thinking, like in this instance.
Exactly.
Definitely, yeah. But basically, he's kind of waiting for them to arrive and throws an army of droids at them. We get the wonderful line coming back up of Anakin half garbled over the comm, going, "I'm beginning to hate these things more than I shudder, hate sand." I could have done without that line, but it was humorous at least.
It's a little on the nose, but it's not like a break thing, you know.
Right, this book was script in hand, but I mean, he's always got to reference something. I think he can't help himself on some level, but it does raise the question: does he wake up every day like, you know? There's like he just thinks of sand. It's like the eternal struggle, sand. You know, it's like every day he's contending with this. Like, I mean, really, like every day. Anakin?
You could just see him walking through Coruscant. He goes by a children's park and he sees some kids in a sandbox, and he's just glaring.
I'm triggering back. You know, like, there's something wrong with
you
it, clearly.
Sand people.
You weren't there, man. You weren't on Tatooine. It's a bit on the nose, but at least it's, you know, shown through the lens of a humor rather than a, you know, romantic moment. Thank God.
Personally, I just love the Hayden Christensen interview at the most recent Star Wars Celebration where he was asked his actual opinion on sand, and he just paraphrased the line from Attack of the Clones. It was truly hilarious. I love his understated humor. I hope to meet him one day.
It would be fun.
Did not hold him responsible for the Anakin travesty at all.
He did what he could.
Yeah. But that what it was given. But that sums up the chapter as a whole, effectively. Any more comments we want to make on Dooku's perspective? Because more of it comes later in the book.
It'll come up later.
Yeah, this is kind of the early kind of encapsulation.
I'm saving most of my commentary on Dooku for Revenge of the Sith.
Oh yeah, but even in this book,
fair
there's
enough.
Much to discuss, but yes. Okay, so then the scene cuts to Yoda meditating on the Force in his little room. He's right now he's thinking about what's going on with the war, and he even dives a little deeper into the Force, and he talks about Qui-Gon Jinn, because often when he mentions when the Force speaks to him, it speaks to him in the voice of Qui-Gon Jinn. Again, it's one of those like a little on the nose scenes with the stuff that's happening not only in Revenge of the Sith but in Rendezvous as well, which is one of those things that's always kind of interesting because he kind of talks about like, oh, the Force is, it's almost like Qui-Gon is speaking to me, and it's like in Rendezvous they pretty much have like a conversation, so it's kind of weird. Yeah. It's weird, when he gets to Revenge of the Sith and Yoda's like, oh, well, you you finally reveal yourself, Qui-Gon. It's like, dude, you've been talking to him for years now.
Yeah, here it seems like he's kind of. It's almost as though Qui-Gon, I can hear his voice talking to me, and like it's coming from the Force rather than him actually acknowledging that is what he's doing. But it's odd because in this book there are so many references to Dark Rendezvous specifically. It can't be that he wasn't aware that at this point Yoda was actually talking to him. So it's just there's a bit of a disparity there. It's odd.
Yeah, and like I said, in Rendezvous, they have a straight up, like, they're talking.
Yeah, they do.
Like, there's no way around.
Yeah, they're talking about Dooku's psychology, and like they're talking about how to deal with him. Yeah, absolutely. I've said before in this review, like in other parts, that while Lucino is like referencing, as always, this isn't like his most refined effort at that. Like there's times where he skims over like the details a little bit. I will say that this moment is a little saved because the point of the scene is that Yoda is not in a moment of clarity. So he's talking about like times where he's at his best. So it's not like happening at this one moment. So it's not too on the nose and too what do you call it? Like convenient timing for the plot. It's not like Qui-Gon's talking to him now. He's just saying what can be the case. But I do agree that there is that disparity where it's like, okay, are you talking to him or are you not from your perspective? Where clearly he should have been by this point.
Yeah, it's a little odd.
More
we also
odd,
get him
though,
sort of...
More odd is the arrival of Mace 2 seconds afterwards. Knowing what we have, or knowing what we do about where he was, presumably 10 seconds previous, because the battle happens, the initial salvos of the battle is what rouses Mace and T to the fact that there is a battle going on beneath 500 Republica in the basement level. And unless Yoda has been sat here, battle raging around him for about half an hour to an hour, Mace effectively got here in like 10 seconds.
Well, the other thing to remember is that there is a fair amount of distance between the Jedi Temple and the Senate District, and it is mentioned that the attack is concentrated on the Senate District. So it's like it kind of took a while for the battle to actually spread to the point where Yoda could see it out his window.
Right, yes, but then you've got to remember that this is Yoda. So unless he is completely blind to the power, the scale of the disturbance that is happening on his home planet where his temple is located, I do not buy that this is not immediately happening afterwards. So the only logical conclusion is Mace is the Flash.
Actually, reading the bit where Yoda's describing his interactions with the Force, today was not one of those days. Today, the current was interrupted by eddies and whirlpools, hydraulic traps whose roar overpowered the voices Yoda sought to hear. Today, the current was not pellucid, but muddled by red soil eroded from distant shores, treacherous with obstacles, tainted. Basically, the battle started when he was super, super deep in meditation, probing the higher reaches of the unifying force. He wasn't quite in perfect tune with the living force. He was a little bit detached from his surroundings, and he was just kind of detecting the battle as more of an interference in the unifying force, which he was basically just attributing to the dark side, as opposed to, oh shit's going down.
And he does basically say that he's kind of off his game today, so I think you could kind of let him slide that his senses aren't really too acute at the moment.
Yeah, I can buy that. Like, the idea that he was otherwise occupied deep into the Force, I can understand. It was just to me that the idea that he hadn't picked it up based on if he was sensing the current present, with his mind in the future, it makes more sense.
It's like they said, he wasn't doing nothing. He had his mind on other stuff. And also, when you feel a disturbance like that, oftentimes you don't really know exactly what it means. And least of all, an invasion on Coruscant, which was just so ballsy because it was so desperate, behind the scenes. But like they never expected this to happen. He's not going to immediately be aware.
So they inform each other that there's an attack, and then Mace reveals that their main communication systems are jammed. So they resolve to use the temple beacon, and that's how the chapter ends.
Mm-hmm. I love the impact of that line.
They also
will use the beacon. The beacon's a minute.
One of the other things that was discussed here is where Yoda and Mace were trying to say, okay, how the hell did the Separatists catch us with our pants down? Weren't our fleet commanders monitoring all the hyperspace reversion points? And then Mace says, they jumped from the deep core. And that's because Dooku gave Grievous secret Jedi hyper routes through the galactic deep core.
Either Dooku or Sidious, or Palpatine rather, who had access to the security clearance. It's the implication.
Anyone with the security clearance or anyone with access to the Jedi archives.
Yeah,
which they do discuss a little bit later. So that's a theory that they talk about.
And you're right to raise that because it's an important point, because it literally makes no sense that the capital would be caught off guard like this. Otherwise, they had to give that explanation to make it make sense that they just jumped this.
And I like that. I like the tension that it gives this entire portion of the book, because the entire time Mace and company are wondering, how the fuck is this happening? But the thing is, the crisis is happening around them. They can't stop and think about it. It's like they have to go deal with it instead of trying to unravel the mystery, which is nice.
And the funny thing I do like is that when you actually stop and think about it and realize that the Sith had access to those secret hyperspace lanes that the rest of the Republic didn't know about, it was almost like an engineered defensive weakness in the Coruscant defense grid that they could have potentially used to orchestrate an attack on Coruscant anytime they wanted. They just chose to do it now, but they could have done so at any time. If Palpatine decided, hey, let's just take over.
They definitely could have, but they just never would have, because it's an unwinnable battle. Like, they only did this to get Palpatine out of there, because he's that desperate. Yeah.
Mace even comments that there literally aren't enough battle droids in existence to hold the planet, because Coruscant is so freaking huge.
There's kind of 3 trillion people there.
Yeah,
so,
it's like referencing back to the Deceived novel with Darth Malgus. It's like Malgus was like, he understood that there was no way they could hold Coruscant, so he was expecting the Sith to just go for an orbital bombardment and just blast the planet into oblivion. Because it's like, if you want to remove Coruscant from play, that's what you have to do. You have to go all Darth Malak Terrace on that bitch.
See the Yuzon Vong. Yeah, but you're right.
Oh, and just for the record, in case anyone's wondering, Coruscant has a diameter of 12,240 kilometers.
Yeah, so it's pretty damn big, but more importantly, it's pretty damn deep, because the multiple layers of Citadel, scaling here is what makes it such a impossible feat to capture. Yeah, because
we talked about the scaling too, with how many troops there are in the galaxy. I mean, there's 3 trillion people on this planet.
Precisely, there's about 1.5 million clones, right? I mean, that's enough.
But that's enough.
It is ridiculous. But yeah, just the idea that you could ever take this, even if you manage to capture the surface, there's no way in hell you're going to be able to capture the infinitely defendable lower levels. So yeah, it's just ridiculous. But that's why this battle is shaped the way it is, and why he gives this kind of definition of how they're focusing on just capturing the Chancellor.
Yeah.
Which we'll get to later. And previous questions, even that objective.
And while all this insanity is starting, in the next chapter, we cut back to Dine and his search. Oh, Dine.
Yeah, I know. I really like Dine. He's so good at his job.
I like.
And it only gets
to get too attached. Try not to get too attached. Yeah.
But he's smart. He tracks transmissions from the battle, going, maybe they're trying to communicate with the forces they're attacking, and follows those transmissions back to the point where they saw Sidious's or Palpatine's, whichever you prefer, footprints vanish, and they so independent of them searching the sublevels, they find this secret passage and begin entering it, and how that's going to end. From the way that
we'll get to that
is framed and the tension that's built up, but yeah, he's very good at his job. And yeah, it's isn't necessarily a good thing. Too good.
Hence his fate. yeah,
precisely. Yeah. But that's what you get when Jedi disappear on you. But yeah, I like the line of the fine finish fix as well. I mean, it's not the first time it's come up in this book, obviously, but we don't think we mentioned it in the previous parts. It's a cool little, the words of the clones, and the little motto mantra,
like a motto.
Yeah. Their house words, which that basically sums up that chapter. It kind of he goes into
very
that
short
and begins his investigation proper into the secret passage, and takes us to chapter 41 with Obi and Anakin currently piling up droids. Literally piling up droids.
Literally,
with the numbers that are being thrown at them, and Dooku sort of sat back in his chair watching them. And yeah, I think Antoine in particular, who couldn't be here for this recording, by the way, but he'll be catching up with his thoughts later in a separate video, wanted to make note of the Force scream Anakin executes here with his, Dooku.
Well, we'll get to that in a sec. There's a few other interesting lines here that builds up to that.
Very true.
Anakin is getting more and more agitated as more and more droids come, and his determination for Dooku just keeps building and building and building. And Obi-Wan's trying to reach him back, and he has the rather interesting line where he says, we can't have me become too powerful now, Master.
Yeah, very snide as he says that.
Yeah, that's a very. I think that says a lot.
Yeah, there are little tidbits where it flips between their standard camaraderie and in sync dualness with the whole opposing conflict of I resent you for the way you treat me and such. It's always flipping back and forth in this book, and it's most of the time it flows nicely. I think there are a few moments where it jars a bit, but yeah, this is one of the more highlighted examples of him getting a little bit snapped.
Yeah, and he snaps all right.
Yeah, with like I said, the Dooku, and just force rages the building apart, bringing the ceiling down on them.
Screams, and it just brings down a 30
Yeah.
by 30 ceiling.
It's a perfect example of how powerful Anakin is when he gets his game face on, but also an example of how rarely he gets that game face on because he can't do it on command whenever he pleases. He needs to get revved up, and the problem is when he's revved up to that point, he's got the least amount of control.
Yeah. For my money, all of this portion of the book should have been on screen. I'd have been fine with a 3.5 hour long Revenge of the Sith movie that included this, especially for scenes like this, because in my frank opinion, Anakin, as he is in the movies, does not come off like the most powerful Jedi in existence, or even potentially. Yes, he fights Dooku, but that's only impressive if you know about what Dooku represents within the course of the lore. On screen, he is fighting an 80-year-old man. Like I wanted more overt, just obvious proof that this boy, like he needs, you know what I mean? Like it just would have been great. Yeah.
It just seems to me that one of the problems with the movies is that they treat demonstrations of lightsaber combat as serious demonstrations of power when it's like, no, you want to give us a serious demonstration? Show us some amazing telekinetic feats. But the movies, it's like they poured everything into the fight choreography, but gave no thought to the actual powers of the Jedi, the sort of things they can do.
And it's interesting the way you bring that up.
That's why so many people underestimate them.
Yeah, the way that you brought that up, Connor, it's like, I mean, this is not a demonstration of technique or like education or practice. Like, this is just power. Like, there's nothing refined about this whatsoever. But that's what makes it so striking, you know.
Absolutely, it's the pure primal raw nature of it, which speaks to Anakin's personal aptitude for the force itself. This is how it manifests his most powerful moments, because this is when he cuts loose. And like I said, you wouldn't want me to get too powerful, would you, Master, with my anger?
In that he's aware of it, yeah. I mean, and the problem is, in terms of being able to relate to the Jedi, like if you just watch Phantom Menace, not to go off on a tangent, this is really quick, trust me, but like they take Anakin in for training kind of without any reason given, like they're like, no, he's too old or whatever. Qui-Gon, he's on one. Who knows what he's talking about? And then like at the movie, they're like, agree with you, the council does. It's like, wait, why? Wait, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? There would have been a big aspect to the tragedy, like from the Jedi's perspective, if they were like, we cannot let this force of nature go unchecked. We have to try to bring it under like our, cloak or whatever. You know what I mean? There's something about, like, to them, this is necessary. He can't just be out there on his own or for the Sith to grab up. Like, we have to deal with this.
And it would have been another example of showing how the Sith engineered a win-win situation. Either the Jedi take Anakin into their fold and Anakin grows to resent them, or they don't, in which case Palpatine could just track him down himself and say, hey, kiddo, I'm a Sith Lord. Want to learn the dark side?
And it's clearly, even without the Plagueis novels insight, it's clearly an unintentional win-win for the Sith that they kind of fell into. But Palpatine is that kind of person that will make that work to his advantage. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's no Exar Kun, and he does plan ahead, but he's also perfectly capable of improvising when he needs to.
Right.
Right. Speaking to this entire battle, full stop.
This book. Yeah.
It's kind of what he's doing. He's just rolling with the punches to the extreme. But yeah, that's that chapter, and then we move on to chapter 42.
We cut to our favorite characters doing the
what
best.
What is the secret to the life, the universe, and everything? 42.
Yeah, Padme evacuating the Senate Rotunda with her Senate associates, effectively, and 3PO, of course. Yeah, this is when T and Stas Ali arrive onto the scene, having come from 500 Republico looking for this Chancellor to sort of secure them away and get him to a bunker. They obviously encounter Padme and learn that he's back in 500 Republica, and T's just like, ugh, I was just there. No, not for him, but something else. But okay, never mind. And they get ready to go and get these few senators that they're kind of showing a bit of bias towards, I guess, to the Ali's speeder, whatever, skimmer. That's the one I'm looking for. Yeah, this introduces one of the biggest problems with the book, I think, or reintroduces, I suppose, but to the higher level, because Padme is Padmeing, and he's like, oh, Anakin, oh, where are you? We need you, Anakin. Yeah, and that's her default setting from here onward now.
She has... There are moments where she actually asks herself, "Am I being selfish? But don't I deserve to be selfish?" And I'm like, I'm just reading this, and I'm like, no, you really don't, and you're being very selfish, and you come off very unlikable in this scene.
Yeah, this is the point where she, a few chapters on, but this set up in the battle, her role in the battle is where she reaches kind of very pathetic levels for me. It's like you're supposed to be a stronger character than this. You're supposed to not be. Right. I mean, look to Bale, look to Mon Mothma, and copy them.
You can't. At least I can't. You can't help but like look at her and like compare it to her daughter, who would not be doing this at this moment. You know what I mean? Like in context, like, can we get our shit together a little bit, please, Padme? Please. Yeah. I don't want to hate Padme. I just am underwhelmed by her at every turn, pretty much. That's all.
Really hate the fact that the character of Padme was so completely wasted on every single level. There isn't a single source, with the possible exception of TCW, that managed to do anything with her. It's like even James Luceno, I kind of get the impression that he's struggling because it's like, I got that stupid character from the movie that I got to stay consistent with. Are you kidding me?
And
it's no wonder Natalie Portman doesn't like playing her.
Yeah. The problem is that most authors have that issue, that no one that I can think of anyway really took the character and spun something out of it. They all went, well, I have to go with the default of the film, and they never kind of engage with her because of the particularly poor execution of that character, not by Natalie Portman, but by the writing. Yeah. No one's been inspired to build on it, and so therefore no one can build on someone else's building, and it just remains neutral the entire time.
Her character stagnates because everyone hates her and no one wants to touch her.
Yeah, there's not enough to build up on. You know, she doesn't really have a defining trait. You know,
she's Bella.
I mean, it seems sort of like, well, yeah. Maybe one step above that. But maybe. It does seem like, because this sort of happened, like off screen in the micro series. She was like telling 3PO we got to evacuate or whatever. It seems like someone asked George, "What's Padme doing?" Oh, she's evacuating senators. So they just did like, okay, we'll make mention of that in like our various works. You know, I mean, there's not much else you can do. You know, it's just not very compelling stuff at the end of the day.
No. And her her dialogue and her selfish remarks just don't help the situation. So it really just comes off as being it comes off as being such a drag to read the sequence. And honestly, like you'll start cheering when Bale and Mon Mothma are introduced in this chapter and pretty much take over from there.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, I think, is the fact that she's standing right next to Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, who are just the pillars of the New Republic and the Rebellion. So it's like,
she makes them. They may as well be having like a cheesy bat suit up like scene right now. Like, I mean,
it's ridiculous.
She completely hands the reins over to them, and they're 1,000 times more compelling.
It's completely ridiculous, especially when you consider how in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, Bale even refers to Padme as a shrewder than he ever could be, and I'm like, shit.
Yeah, where's that? I didn't see.
Where is that?
Yeah, we'll get to the specifics of that in a minute, but that Mon Mothma in particular is a clear example of this, because there are two opposite sides of the spectrum. Mon Mothma basically delivers the line, many Bothans died to give us this information, and that's it. That's effectively her character taken from the films, right? But then in the EU, she's a linchpin of the entire lore. The world, the universe, the galaxy does not function the way it does without Mon Mothma having led it to where it got. But Padme, in contrast, who has 3 films, has almost nothing in the EU. It's she has such a much more significant presence, and she's a nothing character. It shows you what people can do when they apply themselves to kind of expanding on even a single note of the film's content. This is the least interesting chapter. So let's move on.
Okay, so their speeder is attacked, and we get a little bit of foreshadowing where right before Padme faints, she feels nauseous and she puts her hand to her abdomen. Hint, hint.
Yeah. Remember that part in the micro series where the lights went out in her apartment when Anakin was there? Like, this is the fruits of that labor. Anyway.
But yeah, Bale, this is another example of Bale being a badass, flying around as an actual pilot. Not a Jedi, just a standard guy in his car, flying, or someone else's car, flying them down trying to get through this battle. It's almost comedic in how it describes the whole tragedy of the situation, because it is a horror. They're in the middle of a battlefield and they're just flying around like crazy. But because it's Bale and because it's you can envision Mon Mothma just kind of grabbing onto a seatbelt in the back. There's something very comedic about it for me. I don't know about you guys. It came off that way for me.
Well, I mean, Bale is noted to be actually a very skilled pilot, so you know,
it's just
some skills
visual.
just don't go away.
But
So
yeah,
that
then
ends
we
that
get to
chapter.
that ends that one. Move on to chapter 43 with Grievous monitoring the assault from his flag, kind of musing about the nature of the battle and giving us a bit more direction of what the Separatists are up to, physically with the ships in the sky and how the Republic is faring in response. A lot of cool.
I love
military
how
stuff
this
here.
demonstrates Grievous's military intelligence. Him talking about how their strategy, it seems very random and chaotic, and that's entirely the point. So I think I really like how that's described.
Yes.
That being said, again, there's some very obvious terrorism, subtext
Analog, yeah.
in this sequence. Yeah.
I mean, he specifically says terror has its place or something. Terror tactics have their place.
The tactics of terror had their place.
Yeah, and he's
a bit on
rampantly
the nose
ordering.
with that one.
Yeah, he's rampantly ordering. Well, in the context of an invasion, it's a bit different, but he's rampantly ordering, the specific targeting of civilian targets to kind of disrupt the enemy's cohesion.
I feel like that line wouldn't stick out if it weren't for all the other overt stuff that's earlier in the book.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, but
That's
because
what
it piles on to that pile that's already there, so it bears mentioning for that reason.
Yeah, the single straw that broke the camel's back kind of situation. But yeah, I enjoy the military side of this. This helps frame, because we've had everything from the perspective of the boots on the ground types up till now. This kind of helps frame the scale and the execution of the battle as a whole, and give us an idea of what specific, what parts are moving where and how this is all coming together. Gives us a bit
And it
of perspective
also
on the
gives
situation.
you a good idea for just how capable and effective Grievous himself is, because he's able to be one of those boots on the ground operators killing Jedi on the fields of battle while still being conscious of the big picture. It's like he's not just doing shit at random, he's pursuing strategic objectives, but the thing is that he's basically using these shock and awe tactics to obfuscate his objectives, which is actually one of my favorite little bits in the micro series is when Yoda and Mace are back to back on the battlefield talking about Grievous's strategy, and they suddenly realize, wait, this whole thing's just a gigantic diversion to make us run in every which direction. What's he actually after? Oh, fuck, Palpatine!
Yeah.
No, it really... Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, in this book, they kind of shift that perspective or realizations over to Kit Fisto a little bit, later on. I feel like he's the one sort of kind of sifting through the observations everyone's making and cutting to the heart of the matter. But it's also, just to modify what you said a little bit, Connor, actually paints it a little bit better in Grievous's favor. Conscious of the big picture, but in actuality, only a part of the big picture, because he's only privy to so much that Sidious and Dooku know.
Yeah.
So that shines even. He's able to do all of this without really knowing firmly what those two are up to.
Only having half the facts.
We see him
really
kind of
shows his versatility
on faith.
as a general.
Yeah, versatility as a general in the chaotic situation, but also the idea that he's going along with this on faith. He doesn't understand the objectives here, he doesn't understand the reasoning, but he's doing it anyway. It gives you an idea of his motivation as a character. But before we move on, you mentioned there a second ago a little tidbit. I don't think it was intentional on Lucino's part, at least if it is, I'm extremely impressed for the depth he's willing to go. But I like that Kit is the one who can sort through the randomness, because it fits his character. The idea to go with the flow
I feel
and get to the core and driving matter of an issue. It suits him.
I'm leaning toward that not being intentional, but it does fit well.
It's a nice little. It's a nice way. It just kind of lines up.
Yeah, because given the nature of the big people involved, it would make sense more for Shakti to be someone who's sorting through the strategic side. But because it is so random and chaotic, Kit's the person who's going to be looking for the heart of the problem. It's his nature,
and he doesn't do it in a vacuum. He's listening to what other people are saying, and he's able to make sense of it a little bit, sort of instantaneously.
Yeah,
which is like a council. That's like what the council should be doing, like when they're talking up there.
Yeah.
If they ever do, apparently, they just listen to Yoda and Mace back and forth.
Yeah.
A bit of Kiadi.
Surprisingly, that's another thing Clone Wars actually kind of improved on. Weirdly.
Yeah.
But what is interesting though is while we did just talk about Grievous's versatility in the situation, despite having not all the pieces, he does note that the only form of warfare he doesn't, or warcraft as he calls it, that he doesn't truly understand or use very often is ironically Sidious's. Playing the really long game, and he finds
playing the chess game.
Exactly.
Like Grievous is more battlefield logistics. It's like he literally states outright, I've never been much of a Dejaric player. I prefer real war. It's like he prefers that kind of mentality, but, which also kind of shows the areas in which he's inflexible and kind of set in his own ways. He can't expand to try anything new. He's totally specialized towards this one thing.
It makes a lot of mention to his
yeah.
cybernetics as well. The kind of mental processing that's going on. It makes sense that he'd be that way. Because this book kind of highlights the blend of his biological and cybernetic mentalities and how they kind of fuse. We'll get to it later, but there's a specific moment in this book where they actually hit a pure conflict and it gets him into trouble. Yeah, the book does a good job of setting that up with these kind of specific moments where it makes mention of the different kind of thought processes he has going on. But we also cut from him to Yoda as well, so we get the two leadership, the leaders of the battle, respective sides. We get Yoda sat with the Padawan, trying to make sense of through the comm. What's the word I'm looking for?
The jamming.
Jamming, yeah, but the disruption or whatever. There's a word for it. It's easy and I'm forgetting it, but never mind. Trying to get through the interference. There's the word I'm looking for. Padawan helping. I like the fact that they frame this relatively exposition dumpish scene with another lesson from Yoda. He's talking to a Padawan. He's like, "Don't be sorry, not your fault. It's the enemy. Remember that." And then the Padawan themselves has to go, "Oh wait, sorry, yeah, no, not sorry, yeah, I can't reach him." I like that little.
Even
bit
in
of
a
lesson.
situation like this, Yoda is always going to be the teacher, which is just I love that.
Yeah, a little bit of heartwarming for you, even in the course of this battle. And again, showing you that Padawans are doing their jobs. That they're all working. Whether or not they're battlefield combatants, they're in that temple and they're doing their job, which I enjoy. It particularly helps set up the idea and the tragedy of what will come later.
And again, a moment like that would play perfectly on screen.
It would have done, yeah. It would have helped set
they're
the
having
heart of the Jedi up, even small moments.
But yeah, they can't get through the jamming, so Yoda decides to stretch out with his feelings and search for his comrades in the Force, and he ends up sensing Sidious.
Yes.
For the first time.
On Coruscant. And he's like, chilling.
This is bad.
Yeah, chilling nature, which leads us in nicely. I like the cut from this to Dine, because that spine tingling chill that leaves in your head immediately gets delivered on with this next scene of Dine going into the into Sidious's chamber. Mace and T just don't know how close they were. They were.
This scene is actually kind of disturbing. I'm not gonna lie.
It is, and it's like how striking it is, and then that's why I was looking so forward to the end of Plagueis being Plagueis' death from his perspective, because of how this author can write a scene like that.
It would have been perfect.
We did a fanfics for the Plagueis novel and the way his death was executed, and we forgot to mention one of the biggest point that Matt pointed out to us afterwards is that we should have said that it should have been from his perspective, or at least given a certain section devoted to that. And yeah, you're absolutely right. We should have had that from there. But and the reason for why we should is because the dramatic impact of this scene. It's Dine. It's not a massively significant character, but we still feel the tension and the horror of the moment because it's through the lens of this, like I said, dying man. And even the acknowledgement of this being his dying moments, he's kind of not quite there because he's been blasted and disoriented, but it's still kind of like, oh, am I gonna die? And then and that horrible moment of realization on his face when he sees Palpatine, who's not hiding, and he's like, well, you're not hiding.
Well, what happens to him is he gets jumped by two Geonosian warriors, and he gets blasted by a sonic cannon, which basically turns his body into a, how would you even describe it?
Liquefies your insides, effectively.
Yeah.
And apparently slowly, at least in this instance, because he's got time to think about it, which is not fun.
Yeah. So he's just kind of all crumpled heap, all pulpy on the ground, and sees Palpatine walk in, and
that's his retirement present. Thanks for doing your job.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah. As Palpatine literally steps over his corpse and moves on. It's like, oh god. But at the same time, he was like, genius. Brilliant. Because he recognizes how, wow, okay, we lost. Seeing the Chancellor is the Sith they've been looking for, and then just noticing that by highest level of government, he means highest levels of government. But that's a really tragic scene, and I love the execution of it because it was so horrific.
One thing to say is that the novel does not specify that it's Palpatine. It just says the man, because this book is intended to be the prelude to Revenge of the Sith, and they don't want to spoil that. Even though everyone knew going in. I'm sorry.
Well, even then, it is kind of spoiled at the end of this book. So
I gotta be honest. I don't understand why George Lucas decided it was a good idea to not directly acknowledge Palpatine as the Sith Lord throughout the prequel trilogy, because everyone is going to connect Sidious and the Emperor from Return of the Jedi, and they're going to know, oh, so Palpatine is the Emperor. That means Palpatine's Sidious. It's obvious. He's the Sith Lord. So why?
No,
why
that was a different Emperor, Con. It was a different Emperor, different person.
But still, why did he think he could get any kind of mystery out of that? There's no mystery at all.
It's really bizarre. And then when they actually took active steps to keep a mystery, it was blown anyway out from under them. Like, the people that animated Grievous's forearms were like, you are not to say this to anybody. In the cartoon, they show it. In this book, they show it. In promotional materials, they show it. Everyone knew he had 4 arms. You know, so it's bizarre. Like, he puts his foot down on and what he doesn't. It's very weird.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, there were even books like featuring, like, you know, Cloak of Deception we mentioned in the previous part of this, where Palpatine is here, but they don't want to spoil who he is, so they have like a bunch of veiled statements. It's weird.
Yeah,
very bizarre.
Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but is there a scene in that book where Valorum's like recovering in a hospital bed and Palpatine comes in and there's some weird dialogue? I can't remember.
You're testing me now. That book I tried to forget. I flushed that down my mental toilet. That one. Yeah, it's too much.
All right, never mind. Just wondering. But anyway, yeah, so he dies, and that brings up...
move on to chapter 44. With T and Stasali arriving to retrieve the Palpatine, who is less than cooperative.
A little bit indignant.
This is his one-man show. This is
another scene that is directly equivalent to one of the ones in the micro series, but doesn't play out in exactly the same way. Different people there, but they still got shocked. They still got Shock T being trolled by Palpatine because
what makes
this even worse? Like
it's one. I mean, you think it can't get worse than the bold-faced ridiculousness of the cartoon, but trust me, it can. But what makes it even worse than the actual execution, the actual lines he's giving, which are bad enough by themselves, is the fact that he's just brushing himself off after having climbed out of his lift, throwing the robe off and leaving it up in the side room, having just dropped the Sidious persona from coming up from the basement. This is minutes later.
The thing is, he's being so annoying that even if he wasn't like being like a total two-faced liar here, he'd still be annoying. He'd still be trying your patience because he's taking the conversation places it just doesn't need to go. When they're like, Chancellor, be reasonable. Reason? Skies? There's no reason in the skies. We can't be reasonable now. Like, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, I mean, he would just be like, I would have stunned him or something. It's like he's coming, whether he wants to or not. Like haul him over my shoulder. Like, let's go.
And he turns, are you going to force me with your force powers and make me come? And when I don't want to, and it's like, what about my guards? Will you fight them? And they're like, do you Grievous? And the guy's like, yeah. So we'll go along with that.
And then he goes, well, you're all wrong.
Yeah. Well, you're all in here then. So he walks to the window, and that's when Grievous turns up. It's just, oh my god.
Yeah, but instead of Grievous,
gotta buy some time.
Yeah.
But instead of Grievous like busting through the glass, they blow up part of the glass, and then Grievous comes in. Yeah. Which we don't get like the stomp sound.
Yeah, which I like, but we do get that later, which is so it's not completely omitted from the kind of tension and drama. But I did appreciate that in the cartoon. It would have been cool to have a mix of both here. But he was never supposed to be getting off. This was a ruse here. Not that you know it.
What I won't forgive though is we don't get the whole who do you think you are when Grievous like.
Well, no, that's implied. That's implied. It mentions specifically.
Implied, but it's not. It doesn't happen.
No, it's mentioned specifically.
See here. You don't get that. Yeah.
But we do know that he trolls him in some way during the flight up when he actually gets captured. We'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, it's implied that specific line could have been given at least. But
I really like, again, like just what actually happens. It would have just been so dramatic and cinematic on screen, like for them to be dealing with this and to have it like interrupted, like with like sort of that sort of maneuver and attack, and then they realize, oh no, General Grievous isn't attacking Coruscant. He's here, like he's here right now. Yeah. I love that.
It makes so much more sense and had so much more impact to the whole situation of the battle to not have all of this just have been off screen. This is all in the crawl before it gets expanded upon in the EU. It's just by the way, Chancellor Palpatine was captured. That guy from some things. It's like what? It
just comes down to the fact that George Lucas wanted the Revenge of the Sith movie to start with a battle, and he just came up with a basic description, handed it off to the EU guys, and they did the Clone Wars microseries and this book, and that's what it came down to. He didn't actually stop and think, wait, why is the battle being fought? Does it have a reason in the plot? It's like, no, I just need a good action scene.
You know, as with so many prequels, he gives the skeleton, hands it off to someone else, and they make it work.
More than work, though. Like, this is great.
Yeah.
This is much. Yeah, I mean, I would rather read this over again than watch what happened in the movie anytime.
Absolutely, same with the full trilogy. But we'll get to that later.
Indeed. Yeah. So we Grievous attacks, the Jedi take Palpatine, and the chase is on.
Yeah, I like in particular T's constant updates of Mace. Mace, change your plan. Change your plan again. As they go along, she's constantly trying to think ahead, two steps ahead, and get around Grievous and his unpredictability. And I also like that it doesn't tell us what he's actually doing here, so we're guessing as much as anyone else what his true intentions are, even this early on. But then we get
keeps things tense really well.
Yeah, it really is effective. Then we get to chapter 45 with jumping back to Dooku again on Tyth. He's just kind of sitting back and enjoying the
rubble
synchronicity of Obi-Wan. This is post-Rebel. Yeah, he was enjoying the synchronicity of Obi-Wan and Anakin, and this is where that shifts to annoyance and even a little bit of fear, because he's like, literal shock of this sheer power. You know, he says, if I hadn't forcefully leapt out of the way, I would be dead right now. Is this guy a threat? And we get some of his thought processes about Anakin specifically.
He bigs up both their threat level, but he obviously concentrates more on Anakin because he just brought a freaking ceiling down by screaming.
Yeah. It's interesting kind of contrast to, again, his respect and appreciation for the two's abilities, because he says, if only Grievous had been here to witness their elegance effectively. It's just begrudging respect encapsulated, and this is the chapter that kind of hammers that point in for him.
For me, it's a section that I like in and of itself, and what it means, and again, like him sort of being slowly shaken out of his comfort zone, which he always has issues with. Having said that, it doesn't play quite as well with some of his thoughts when he's watching them in the Revenge of the Sith novel, where he sees them as sort of try-hard and sloppy. But we'll get to that when we get to that. It's just a moment of like the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing for me when you add both books together. On its own, it's a good scene.
Yeah, it's because of the different in authors, I guess. Which is a shame. But most of the consistency is there, so it's just a standout moment, unfortunately. But yeah, that's effectively.
We also get a little moment of doubt from Dooku.
Yes,
we get a little moment of doubt from Dooku, and it's even like the fragility of the grand plan is kind of explored a bit more in this instance, because he even like literally wonders, like, what if the attack fails? What if the Jedi defeat the Separatists? What if Sidious is apprehended? What's going to happen to me? It's a moment of fear. And there's another little callback to Rendezvous where he's like, well, you would have mentioned that the temple would always be open to me, but no, that could never happen. Yeah, I think that's again, a little dive into his psyche that I really like, because it kind of explores what could have been and how so much of this, could have gone so differently, so quickly.
It's also just a sad tragedy of Dooku, because it's like when you go back to Dark Rendezvous, he was on the verge of saying no to the dark side and going back to the Jedi Order, but Sidious had to fuck that up with his manipulations. And this is Dooku after that, and he's like, I've passed the point of no return. I can't go back. I am of the dark side now. That's who and what I am. I can't stop. And
that's why, even though I don't know if I like Sidious, but he's a great villain, and he is an expert manipulator, because it is fragile. He could literally tell the Jedi, like, he's Palpatine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At any point. But it's like Palpatine's so cool and such a great villain because he's that arrogant and cocky and that I've conned you so thoroughly. Like, I own your ass. Like, I'm going to be able to predict your move and show you what you need to be seen to keep on following me at any given moment. That's what makes him compelling villain for me.
Yeah, it's the emotional manipulation.
And he can't do it. He can do it to anyone but Luke. That's why Luke is such a great hero.
Yeah, it's another perfect example of how Palpatine is inherently a human character. Palpatine is inherently
he is a great hero. Forget that.
I know. No, I still believe he is, but I'm just saying. A lot of people don't now.
Who cares?
Last Jedi.
NJO for life.
Yep. Absolutely. But you're right. It's the Palpatine's ability to manipulate people on a personal level rather than the grand scheming that he does. That's what makes him so engaging. Because who cares about the high-minded stuff when you can have character exploration attached to it. But yeah, you mentioned this doubt in Dooku just before we move on, Evan. I particularly enjoy the contemplation of the two paths he could take. He goes I could come back to the temple because Yoda said, nah, that's not really going to happen, is it? Yoda might let me in, but no one else will. And then the retirement as well. Maybe there's a quiet moment to retire in the galaxy. This is a moment that shakes him so powerfully to his foundations that he's almost giving up the entire motivation for him starting this war in the first place. The political.
He's
control.
literally like, should I just get into my ship and just vanish because I can?
Yeah, it's interesting. You kind of get some vibes, like it was almost like Ventress's original ending in the comics.
Yeah. Yes, exactly like
actually,
that. Yeah, flying off into space. It would have been an interesting end for Dooku. I don't think I would have wanted it. More than what we actually got, sure, but I wouldn't have wanted it in the face of some of the other options we could have had.
It fits the character. I just wouldn't prefer that to how he actually ends up going. But and it also plays well because even though he continues going on, he's still looking forward to retiring in the Revenge of the Sith novel, as we learn. It's just in a different context, but we'll get to that book when we get to that one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But then
he does retire, but not in the way he expects.
He is retired.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. Chapter 46 though. Back to Padme being Padme.
Do we have to?
Our favorite.
But the more
Just
important
focus
thing,
on Mon Mothma and Bail. You'll be fine.
yeah, the more important thing
I
is
do
that
like
at
the
the moment,
sequence where like Mon Mothma is like, you're no time to sleep, Senator. Grab a blaster.
Yeah.
Like, that's badass.
Yeah.
I got to admit.
the fact that Bail, is out there looking in the cover, looking around, checking the battlefield, while Mon Mothma helps her out of the speeder, and then they immediately run to pick up a set of blasters. It's like, why are you engaging these droids? You're senators, but I don't care because it's awesome.
But also, why are they the ones doing it? Because of the three of them, who fought on Geonosis?
Yeah, precisely.
Hello? I mean, excuse me.
Yeah,
I don't understand.
You can't.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest things about this part of the book, and what I mentioned earlier, that the fact you can't marry the idea of Padme from screen to Padme in the book here, because she's so, Anakin, save us, please, and these guys are picking up blasters. Yes, she does as well, but it's them who's taking the charge.
Yeah, this is Padme in full-on Revenge of the Sith mode when her character is officially at its weakest.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, she's not. She hasn't even got the combat fire in her anymore, which is the one thing she did have going for her. But Mon Mothma and Bail do, and they are awesome with it. Just the vision of Mon Mothma and many Bothans died to give us information. Picking up a full-on blaster rifle. It's like, yes, you are the leader of the rebellion. Thank you.
Man.
I like that it sets that up. She even jokes and says, and I thought the Senate was a battlefield, as she's throwing the gun down after the fight. It's like, Jesus Christ, you just get shot at.
That's very Star Warsy humor. That could have been on screen. It feels like that. Yeah. It's in that vein.
It's just the fact that she said it as well. It makes it so much more brilliant.
Yeah. We even get a little moment where Bail sort of calls out, Dooku, Grievous, Gunray, and Palpatine as it's all being crazy, and Mon Mothma agrees with him, and she even comments on how she thinks the Jedi could have stopped it. So it's an interesting little perspective play.
Yeah, she also says, that's a good point actually. The fact that we get the individual perspectives of each of them. Mon Mothma saying, Palpatine will never survive this. She's a bit more of the optimist in the situation, saying this will end his power. The Senate will get rid of him and it's fine. What they should do. But then Bail comes in saying, no, this is going to make him more powerful than ever because the Senate is weak and they're fearful and they'll just lend him more. Shrug off their responsibilities and give it all to him. And then you've got Padme going, I should object to this abuse of Palpatine, but I can't because Anakin. It's like it's
pretty much. Yeah.
Once again, showing those shrewd political instincts.
Yeah. But meanwhile, the other two are actually having a proper discussion in the middle of a battle, which any other time I'd be like, this is ridiculous. But because it's these two, the founders of the rebellion, it just makes it much more awesome. But then we can move away back to the Jedi, chapter 47 on the maglev train.
Ooh.
This is where we get the stomp of Grievous on the train, but not before we get the tension of everything else happening, because he doesn't just typical Grievous style, typical Grievous training. He doesn't just go straight in. He doesn't know who's guiding them specifically, but he knows that he doesn't want to engage any Jedi without a little bit of flair first. He lets the
he sends his Magna Guards in to soften them up.
Yep.
Not even Magna Guards to start with. It's just the basic droids that he drops down. He only takes the two that when he goes in personally. He sends the Volta droids flying in to wreak havoc, and as well as the battle droids he drops in. I like these moment where Mace and Kit run into the train or the car, and I just okay, as they see battle droids suddenly. Where the hell did they come from? They didn't come from the Volta droids, and the passengers. It was kind of a Spider-Man 2 moment. With that was the visual I had anyway. With
maybe
Doc Ock just moving the passengers aside. I can imagine that being like the Force. Because they were worried, obviously. They didn't realise that this was Mace Windu and Kit Fisto. They just saw a Jedi. Oh god, we're about to get deflected into. They're going to shoot bolts back at us.
Yeah. Now, before we get into the big fight, I just want to mention this because I'm pretty sure someone will if we don't. Kit Fisto's lightsaber is incorrectly identified as blue in this book.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd throw that out there.
It is green. It's not blue here. Well, it is, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah. It's blue
Visualized
here, but
green.
it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So,
it's so funny.
Lightsaber continuity error.
It's funny coming from Lucina, who knows everything too.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah. It's no one can be perfect all the time. When even the
No.
master of law that is Lucina.
The funniest thing is that back when Clone Wars Season 1 was playing and I was still a fan of the show and hadn't started hating it yet, I kind of rationalized this with the fanboy explanation that, maybe Kit Fisto is just carrying Nadar Veb's lightsaber alongside his own to commemorate his poor fallen student, and that's just a lightsaber he's wielding right now because it's Grievous and he wants to wave this in Grievous's face as a fuck you.
And then went, fuck that, and threw it away when he went to fight Palpatine.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I don't like that.
Well, Nadar Veb wasn't killed by Palpatine.
It's true, but the visual of...
I'm making fun.
I know, but the visual of him like switching the crystal up, right? No, I'm fighting Palpatine today. It's back to normal.
These aren't my Sith fighting trousers. I mean, my different pants. That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Just
so let's throw that out.
But yeah, good to point that out, Evan, because someone else would otherwise.
So we get now. So Grievous makes his entrance, and things unfold.
Yeah, interesting battle. Antoine in particular wanted to discuss this, so I'm sure he'll have many thoughts in his personal video. But we get an exploration of how Grievous functions mechanically, both combatively and literally mechanically. Because the way he's engaging Mace, he very quickly kind of absorbs the information and data of his Varpard technique, and almost, it specifically states not quite, but he almost manages to get the kind of at least movements and sequences and technique down to mirror it back at him, which Mace notes. He's like, I don't want this combat to go on too long. We see that he can pressure even someone like Mace Windu here.
And it's also an example.
You know what's crazy is like since I watched Captain America: Civil War for the first time a few days ago, when I reread the sequence, my mind instantly flashed to that scene towards the end where Iron Man suit scans Captain America. It's like fighting style analyzed, and like Tony's like, okay, let's kick his ass. That's basically what happens here.
Yeah, effectively.
Oh, go ahead, Connor. Sorry.
The other thing I like is that this is a perfect example of Grievous in his element when discussing the practical function of his fighting style. What Grievous wants more than anything else is he wants his opponent to come at him so he can slug it out directly and leverage his cyborg capabilities to overpower them. Whereas what he has the most trouble dealing with is evasive defensive fighters they can't pin down. But in his own element, he's going toe-to-toe with the creator of Vapad, and he's holding his own, which tells you just how bloody dangerous and powerful he is when he's actually got his game face on.
It really is a fight that like really sells Grievous's threat level, as this book on the whole really does, which is a massive strength to it. It's really unfortunate, that it couldn't have stayed that way, but still.
Sorry, Matt, you go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. If you were going to say something connected to that point.
I was just going to say it's important that it sets up Grievous as a whole, regardless of the fact that nothing was done with it. It's important on that level for the entire book, but more specifically, what's to follow this specific scene. What he does moving forward. We'll get to in a minute. It kind of sets up the reasonable explanation for him being capable of that. This is if you haven't seen any other material with him being able to pull off what he does in this moment lets you buy what comes next, which I think is very important.
Mm-hmm.
I also really like just the way that Mace approached him from the start. He was attacking him before he drew his lightsabers. Like he was trying to, it's like he's in kill mode, which he's a Jedi. Don't forget that. But it's like when the situation is this dire, we're not gonna do this posturing, okay, I'll bring my sword out and you'll do the same, and we'll get ready to fight in the Duel of Fates, because not time for that. This is war, goddammit, and this is Mace Windu's personality.
This is not a Sergio Leone Western where the two combatants spend 10 minutes circling and assessing. This is enemy.
It's what he does in the micro series where he just crushes him with the Force, it's the Saber's equivalent of that. It's like, this is not going to be a fair fight if I don't have to make it one, you know. And when it becomes one, it's like, I'm going to cut the dueling ground out from under you, and you know, like, I mean, it's like, I love that. And it's also just like how, because that's also a master. It's like a master realizes, okay, he's equaling me. I'm going to change my tactics and do something he can't, you know, which I love that. Like these two, Stover and Lucina, they understand Mace Windu so well. Well, hence the Shatterpoint book that Stover wrote. But you know what I mean? Yeah. I just love when they make him a character, like both in terms of what he says and how he acts, you know?
Yeah, because he overtly, in terms of dialogue, he doesn't really change that much from what we got in the films. We know how dryly that was delivered. But because of all the mental processing,
they do more with it somehow.
Yeah, they give it. They take that kind of blunt poignancy and they deliver it with more detail and depth, and they just layer on his thought process and his, you know, how that manifests in his actions, and it makes it so much more interesting and believable as well.
I also like that they explain how this fight is even logistically possible without getting boring and dry and overbearing with explanation. Like, you know, this literally, if you saw it on screen, it would look, okay, could this really be happening? Like, Mace is holding himself onto the dueling ground with the Force, like, which he would have to be doing, you know? Like, it's just casually explained, but it's like, I like that they bother to, so that you're not questioning it. And it fits in line with Jedi capabilities, whereas Grievous is, like, magnetized to the thing. It's just so cool, you know. I love that,
and the fact that is what gives him the advantage with cutting the dueling ground out from under him. You know, he's reliant on that connection, and the fact that he fought. And this is the moment I mentioned before, where we get the conflict of Grievous's mechanical and biological instincts, kind of literally coming together and making him lose his fight. I like that the setup of the advantages here is what makes that so powerful. A trump card for Mace. He's like, well, I've got the Force, you've not got the Force. Slices the floor. And then turns his asset of magnetism against him.
Mace, and it says a lot about Mace's badassery that everything he did was like a calculated move, because he was able to think clearly because he's Mace Windu. So regardless of everything else Grievous has done throughout this whole war, not just in this book, but up to this point in other sources, he's not afraid of him, which says a lot, you know, to people who are keeping up with the lore. That says a lot, you know.
It really does. And also the fact that everything he's doing speaks towards his Shatterpoint ability as well, without ever making mention of it. He's specifically saying weakness, exploit, advantage, exploit. He just does it. He perceives and he executes, and that's kind of Mace Windu in a nutshell. It's why he's so clear cut, and it's why he seems so blunt to everyone, because he doesn't care about your politics or your he understands it and he appreciates it, but he doesn't care about that. He's just going to get to the heart of the problem and deal with it.
He cares about the destination and not the journey, you know.
Yeah, which is a flaw as well as an advantage. But here it's nice to see it working in his favor and everyone's favor.
It's also the other thing I like about the conflict between Grievous's remaining organic survival instincts and his mechanical parts is that it shows the degree to which he's been engineered. The Sith literally tried to program the survival instinct out of him and turn him into a pure berserker, but they weren't quite successful. It's like part of Grievous is still like, I don't want to die.
Yeah, I mean, the warrior instinct and fear in general is important, because it's what gives you that edge, that instinctual, immediate ability to just reflexively respond to any dangerous situation, and that's kind of partially, or at least the conflict of it is overriding his ability to immediately execute that, which is what makes him lose. It's that conflict. If he had been biological in this instance, not that he'd been able to achieve as much as he did with that, but if he was in this specific moment and biological, he wouldn't have made that literal misstep. So it's nice that it kind of sets up the again, the undoing of the Separatists and the Sith through their own machinations, literal machinations. It's very poignant.
And I want to say real quick, I don't know if we want to move on yet, I just want to make this point that when I picked up this book and I read it, I didn't know this scene was coming. So it's doubly awesome, because if it comes kind of out of nowhere, it's really cool. And I read it fairly early on. Like, it wasn't common knowledge that this was the book where that happened at the time. So it was a surprise.
Yeah, it's very just exciting, if nothing else. Yeah, but basically Mace Force pushes him off the edge of the train. Kit I like the description of Kit cutting up the magnadroids and them just flying off like flies in the wind. That happens.
Martial arts hurricane, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's why.
The Nautilin's blade was a cyclone of blazing green light.
Martial hurricanes from Cestus Deception.
Yeah, that's the description. But this is why.
Still, it's also a perfect. it's also a perfect example of where and how Kit Fisto himself is effective. He's described here as fighting 2 Magna Guards. That's a group fight. That's what Shicho is designed for. He's in his element. You don't sick multiple people on Kit Fisto, because that's multiple people who are going to die. You sick one guy who knows what he's doing.
Yeah. A skilled one guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sees off that chapter, and we cut back with chapter 48 to Anakin buried under rubble.
Yes, Vision of Coruscant moment. He's kind of
yes.
While Padme's like, oh Anakin, he's like, oh Padme, and at least his one track mind is an established part of his character, so it doesn't come quite as jarring. Given his situation, but yeah, he's kind of unintentionally going into the Force as they kind of have that Leia Luke Force bond moment across the galaxy, perceiving the Battle of Coruscant and knowing that he needs to get back at least, and knowing that there's a crisis going on. He doesn't know for sure because that gets confirmed later. But yeah, he's out there, and we get some more another visual into his psyche, particularly at this moment, because the next few chapters kind of are refocusing his attention on that perspective towards him and Obi-Wan specifically. We'll get a moment later on where that's highlighted, and this sets that up. Oops, sorry, dropped my pen.
It also establishes that Anakin Skywalker, for all of his failings, is still an intelligent individual. It's like, he may not have much in the way of self-control, but when he does stop and think, he's usually right on the dot. The problem is that he doesn't do it very often because he has so little self-control.
Indeed. And it's, again, Obi-Wan that has to pull him from that brink of not despair, but distraction, at least, as he says, you want to give me a hand forcing this off?
Yeah.
and they lift the rubble literally from the backs and break out of it. But that's effectively that chapter. Does anyone want to make mention of anything else?
I mean, it's literally 2 pages.
It's
one
another
thing
short
I want to
one.
mention is the little line at the start where, in his mind's eye, he saw Padme stalked by a dark, towering creature with a mechanical head. And I was just like, oh, so here's the direct little equivalent to the Vision Quest from the micro series.
Yeah.
Only that's the one aspect of the micro series I will say was much better. For the most part, the whole thing on Nelvon is inferior to Tithe, but that Vision Quest was way better because they went all out. Whereas this is literally just Anakin has a weird vision of what's to come. The creature with the mechanical head.
Yeah, again, the foreshadowing is very subtle.
Yeah, but
I mean,
plucking the string.
But all Anakin knows is mechanical, so he assumes Grievous, and that's what triggers him naturally. Again, his own destiny defined by his missteps. It's thematically powerful.
And
I mean, to be fair, it makes sense he would make that assumption given that he's not Vader yet,
Definitely, yeah. It's perfectly believable, but I like the fact that it is that tragedy again coming into the foreground.
All right, so moving on to chapter 49. We didn't quite cover this, but at the end of the Mace Windu Grievous fight, Grievous's gunship shoots the maglev train track, and it derails, and it starts falling, but doesn't quite. And this is basically just picking up with, basically the Jedi are just trying to salvage the situation because, holy crap, maglev train derailing, and because this is Coruscant, it's hundreds of feet up, which means if it falls, everyone dies.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mace entertains the thought briefly, like, maybe we can lift the thing. And it's, I personally, I believe this particular combination of these could. I personally believe this could have been done by these particular characters. Given what we know of their powers, it's well within
a single train. I mean, I'm pretty sure Mace alone could do that.
They've lifted weights comparable to this train elsewhere in the EU. This is not something that would take 5 Yodas. This is literally like Mace is like, shit, I can do it, but I need like a minute of prep time because fuck.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, the fact that it's Shaak Ti, Kit Fisto, and
it really
Mace
doesn't
Windu,
make much sense.
I mean, and Stas Ali to an extent. Yeah. She's definitely the weaker of the 4, but still.
She's just not known much. Yeah, really.
She's a council member. These are 4 council level Jedi. These are not standard people. They could easily do this together.
Yeah,
which I'm not a fan of.
They all lift multi-ton weights on a pretty regular basis. Yeah. All of them combining their powers. This is child's play for them.
Yeah.
The sand crawler that Mace stops from falling in the Shatterpoint novel that takes place years before this was probably bigger than this train car.
or at least close to. Yeah, it's.
I think that's sort of the. I think that's sort of the frustrating thing about some characters is like when their telekinetic feats are in a book, they're not so overt, so people lose track of what they've done on some level, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not excusing this. I'm just saying that I think that's probably what tends to happen. Because, I mean, how many people can you say that wouldn't even entertain the idea of Mace being near Dooku level with telekinesis when clearly, you know, he's done a lot that people just don't acknowledge, period.
Yeah, and
in my experience.
The fact that they don't even, you know, just hold it in place while the rescue team arrives. They
doesn't really add up.
I also think that there might be a chance that what Lucino's picture is bigger than what I mentally pictured. I have no idea though. That's just a possibility I felt like mentioning.
It does say 20 cars, I think, to the train or something like that.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I'm willing to say in his head, whatever he's scaling out might be bigger than what I'm picturing in my.
No, but with the 20, I can kind of buy it possibly being the scale it needs. But even so, I can buy Mace not being able to do it alone. I can't buy 4 Council Masters not being able to do it. They can live a lot combined.
Well,
but regardless, it's a bit of a nitpick.
It has to be a gargantuan if he thinks 5 Yodas need to be there at the end of it. I'm not saying it was entirely excused. I'm just saying I'm trying to rationalize what he's picturing a little bit. I do agree with you at the end of the day. I'm just saying.
Yeah. But they do manage to get everything settled and. They decide to split up. Mace and Kit go back to fight with the troops while Shakti and Stasali stay with Palpatine. And in order to help them, we get the introduction of 4 new Jedi to help protect the Chancellor. And they are Roran Korib, the Ithorian from the micro-series, Thal Mudama, the Tals from the micro-series, plus 2 more Jedi that weren't in the micro-series. We got Bink Utrilla, a red Twi'lek, and we got Roth Del Musona, who's just a human male who actually briefly appeared. He was one of the Jedi in the arena in Attack of the Clones.
And so he's at least up there. But yeah, they turn up to kind of be the red shirts of the story, as we'll see later. But at least we know that they've had some development and backstory to them attached, as much as effectively no-name characters can do in Star Wars. I mean, it's nice to know they're not just blank faces on the page.
It does kind of suck that the book doesn't actually name them.
Yeah, it is a shame. They talk about one of them. I remember
all that
one
much.
of them, but at least it does acknowledge the fact that not every Jedi knows every other Jedi, because there are a lot of them.
Yeah.
So it makes sense on that level.
So they kind of resolve to protect the Chancellor, and we just kind of move on from there to Chapter 50.
Yeah, Mace and Kit go after Grievous, who's obviously Mace suspects that Grievous survived for whatever reason. He's not quite sure why, but he suspects. Him and Kit go off to chase him down while the rest of the 6 other Jedi at this point go and lead Palpatine to the shelter.
And this is kind of that moment we talked about earlier where Kit starts to kind of put the pieces together of what's going on with the whole battle being a distraction. And he kind of talks to Mace like, this is a distraction. And they're like, turn around, turn the gunship around. Yeah,
Mace does a lot of shouting pilot in the films and EU.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to note, it's a small thing, but it caught my attention. The Coruscanti emergency services cannot get enough praise for their response times. It specifically notes that as the gunship hits the ground, Mace is already hearing the sirens as they turn up in the middle of a pitched battle. These guys are good.
I mean, they better
maglev
be.
Train as
They
well.
gotta be.
They better be. I mean, when else do they actually have to work? Coruscant looks very stable to me normally. These guys, they can't believe we have the wrong shift. This is the one shift in ever that we've had to do something like this.
Maybe they're like, it's finally our time to shine. Let's do this.
Yeah. Okay, you've done
Everyone's
the
all
go, and they just immediately go down the road. I mean, apart from anything else, they need to because of the scale of the planet. 3.5 trillion people. They need to be on point with this. But yeah, I thought it was worth noting because they do immediately turn up in both crisis situations.
So we cut back to Grievous cutting a bloody swath to get to the Chancellor, where he actually kind of starts. He's actually lamenting a little bit his duel with Mace. He's actually kind of happy Magna Guards were destroyed because they couldn't see what happened to him.
Yeah, he feels shame from that.
Yeah, and a lot, again, it goes back to him thinking about, Dooku was right. I'm not the best of the best yet. I'm not ready to tangle with all of them, not consistently anyway. He was able to adapt. He was able to begin to adapt to what Mace was bringing to the table. But this is the equivalent of him being mildly traumatized by a defeat or being bested in some way, almost being killed. He's not used to that at all.
Meanwhile, as he's musing this, he's cutting a literal bloody swath through the corridor to get to the entrance to the shelter itself.
This
is all
the
rank and file defense.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm
just
and such.
Yeah, personally, I just imagine this sequence as just like Grievous dead center, flanked by his guards, and it's like just one of those bits where it's like handheld camera, really emphasizing the brutality of his murder. It's like bits where it's like he won't even kill a guy with a lightsaber; he'll just walk up and like break his neck with a wrenching motion or something like that. Like put a guy in a lock and dead.
Yikes. So he comes up, and this next sequence I really like because he comes up and confronts the Jedi, and the book kind of because here's what I really like about this scene. Now the segment where Dooku lectures Grievous about what he needs to engage the Jedi isn't quite the same here as in the micro series, you know, him saying you must have fear, surprise, intimidation, all that on your side. But I think this little sequence is a really good demonstration of him using those tactics that Dooku was talking about, because it specifically notes that he comes up to the Jedi and he like pauses for effect, and he literally bats away blaster bolts with his bare hand just for the sake of effect. And he's doing this just to build up the intimidation more and more and more. And it really starts to even like affect the Jedi. Like they even talk about how they're actually a little bit nervous to engage him. And I think this is a beautiful demonstration of those principles.
I mean, even him opening
even
the
before
door.
that. Yeah, that's arguably, aside from his debut appearance, like that's my favorite thing he ever did, was like he didn't just use the code. He said, I could just go through it, you know, like in the normal way, I could cut through it. But this is more shocking. Like this will like mentally like undo them before I even get in there. It shows he's smart, you know, and there's so few examples of that, particularly, you know, after a certain thing, you know, his character changed, but still, I love that. That's one of my favorite things.
Personally, I just imagine that thought process being visualized with him standing in front of the door, kind of reflecting on it. We see him bring a hand to his lightsaber, tap the hilts a bit, but he's like, no, types in the code.
You can see the shots on screen of his hand just kind of claw coming up and tapping the code in, and like in such a, it's kind of just emerging from the cloak as he's kind of after contemplating about it. You know, I can visualize this thing so perfectly, and it's so dramatic. I like that it sets up, because what immediately follows is could have been comical in the interpretation if we hadn't had this initial thought process setting up his focus on the flipping, you know, the importance of the flair of drama. Because the next thing he does, he opens the door, is he strikes a pose. You know, he specifically says he strikes a pose for dramatic effect. He deflects the bolts for dramatic effect. You know, as you said, Evan, it sets up that
which he can apparently do.
Yeah, which apparently he can do now. Yeah, but that's fine. I can buy that easily if he's got the strong enough talons.
It's just really cool. I wish we saw that more often.
Yeah, it's just
flicking away blaster bolts with his bare hands. I mean, it's pretty badass.
Just the sheer indomitability of him. You know, it's just it's impressive to see, and I like that he framed it this way. As well, Matt, you said how, you know, he's not ready for Mace Windu. He's more than ready for these guys. The fact that he could stand up, he couldn't defeat him, but he could stand up to him. That helps sell the fact that he just mows these four down.
He directly compares them to him, like what he just went through. So these four like novices compared to Windu. You know, I can deal with this. You know.
So he fights the four Jedi. Roth dies first. Then Rowan Korb gets struck. Well. Yeah, Rowan Korb gets struck down after that. Then he goes to engage the remaining two. And what's interesting is he decides to take out two more lightsabers, but instead of engaging his extra appendages, he uses his feet. And I think this is the book's attempting to keep the whole, like you mentioned before, Matt, the whole forearms thing a secret, which ironically was spoiled in the micro series. And personally, I actually think the micro series should have kept it a secret. I'm just saying it would have probably had a little bit more of an impact in the film.
The reason I like the moment in the micro series, while I agree with the idea that they should have respected the wishes to keep it a secret, I do really like the moment where he sees Mace Windu and immediately goes for four blades. I love the satisfying effect just going straight for that moment.
They didn't so much disobey anyone's wishes. They were given alternative directions, like from George. You know what I mean? Like they would never have animated that just for the hell of it. They were told to do it. You know, so it's like it's weird. You can listen to the commentary of Revenge of the Sith, and the animators of the CGI are going, "We don't know how this got out. We were like under lock and key. Like we were not supposed to say this to anybody, and yet everyone knew." But you go, well, duh. The video game came out before the movie did. These books came out before the movie did. I mean, hello. I mean, it's like it just there's no keeping a secret. It's stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it would have just been interesting if they had actually kept it a secret.
Oh yeah, but it just would have been like a more concerted effort would have needed to be made on the part of this is in no other media but the movie. Like that would have worked.
Yeah.
See, I thought they'd been actually given the directive to do that. That's interesting.
It was kind of all over the place, you know.
But of course, what this scene indicates, of course, is that if Grievous ever wanted to, he is entirely capable of fighting you with 6 lightsabers, splitting his arms, and using the repulsor lifts built into his feet.
Oh, God.
And I can understand why that's not practical on a regular battlefield situation, because when you're floating in the air on a repulsor lift field, well, you got no ability to ground yourself. It's like literally a forceful strike will send you drifting back. But in the vacuum of space, where those repulsor lifts would help him maneuver.
God,
Can you imagine if Grievous had a
flailing
jetpack?
Grievous with
What if he had a
6.
jetpack?
I don't want to see it. See, like less is more sometimes.
Yeah,
that's too much.
It's too ridiculous. The idea of them flailing through the air, just blades spinning. You just know.
I mean, it's also because just the dramatic level, it wouldn't work because he's floating in the air. It's like, I'm ready now for you. It's just like, I mean, it's just, my God.
Just think of Dooku's face as he sees him doing that, flying past his bridge window. It's like, oh my God.
He would literally be like swiveling through the air, like just like pointlessly. It's like, no.
Anyway.
Yeah, so he eviscerates Val Mudana, and Bink is the last one standing, and Grievous even starts to take pity on her because she starts to get terrified.
Matt, you
Which
mentioned
I like
it in the
that
previous
aspect
part.
of his character.
You mentioned this in the previous part that we did for the recording, part 2, I think, how he does take pity on them.
Yeah, I mean, or he honors worthy victims, warrior, competition, and even when it's contradictory events, like the actual spirit with which it's given is in line. Like I'll give you a warrior's death prepare. He doesn't kill Shakti. He just ties her up so she can live with her shame and victory. Things like that. And he even uses the word like it would be cruel to do otherwise, to prolong this, or to be like like it's just a quick death. He has a sense of something being over the line, which you don't necessarily think of when you look at him. I mean, his face is a skull, but I mean, he has a sense of, he
mercy. Has standards.
Yeah.
And the other thing is one of the reasons why I love this presentation of Grievous is that he's got very, very little malice towards the Jedi. It's like he's kind of in the same vein as Dooku, where he kind of views them as they're just obsolete and need to be taken out, and it's my job to do that, so let's do it. It's not like the TCW where it's like a future without Jedi, because fuck Jedi. It's like...
Well, I mean, he does have a little bit of baggage, considering what the whole thing with the Huck and all that, but it's definitely not as pronounced.
It's not like the defining aspect of his character. Yeah. And to a certain extent, he kind of... It also seems to me that he understands that the Jedi Order as it is now is based on indoctrination, that none of these people had any real choice over whether they were to be Jedi. They're here because
it all shakes out to he does hate the Jedi, but he has other things on his mind. He kind of knows his place and what his real objective is, and he's not blinded by his hatred of the Jedi.
I particularly like the fact that everything he does to inspire terror and awe and shock is a mask. Even the like you said, he's literally a guy with a skeleton face. I like the fact that that's not his character. He's doing that for a reason. Everything he does is for a reason. It adds depth and believability and an impact to all of his the individual moments we get with him. And like you said, the fact that it would be cruel to do otherwise. He's not just being cruel for cruel's sake. He has reasons. It's more engaging for a villain that way.
It's also the commonality to Vader and to Dooku in the EU that makes these villains more frightening and more compelling. They're not sadists who revel in your pain. Your pain is their means to an end, which is 10 times more frightening than, ooh, pain.
Yeah. So speaking of pain, Grievous, after slaughtering the last tries to apprehend. He apprehends him, but not after a little bit of good old trolling on Palpatine's part.
Yeah, this is the moment where you learn Palpatine truly cannot turn the troll off, because he doesn't have to control his actual pawn. This is his general that he told to come here. No one. This isn't for the benefit of anyone else. He's just doing this because he wants to. it's
That's who he is.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and I love it, and it helps sell the robot chicken side of him.
And it's also just the irony of the fact that Darth Bane initiated the Rule of Two because he wanted to purge the Sith Order of what he viewed as sadistic fools. Yet the irony is that the greatest sadist of them all was arguably the ultimate product of the Rule of Two, Palpatine. He does so much shit for shits and giggles.
It all depends on how you look at it. He's the zenith when it comes to like fulfilling the Sith dream, basically. But
that's why I said arguably. I didn't say definitively.
There's two different ways of doing it or answering the question. He's just not the man that Bane would have. He does what Bane wanted the Sith to do. He's not the man that Bane would have wanted to sit there, of course.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I do think that Bane probably would have respected Plagueis a lot more than Palpatine, because for all of their ideological differences, both Plagueis and Palpatine are lawful evils who place the well-being of the Order as their first priority, whereas Palpatine is a neutral evil whose sole objective is building an edifice to his own ego.
He literally is the entire reason he does anything, which I just love the fact that we get more depth than that. It's not that's the only reason from doing stuff. He has little token moments of just, I want to do this for fun because I want to, which is what this moment represents. But we get then to chapter 51. With Mace arriving and viewing the carnage, having come back from the gunboat crash, and arriving at the shelter too late, effectively. We should mention as well that Shakti
it's basically just a regroup.
Yeah, we should mention as well that Shakti and Sassily weren't in this scene because they had been relegated to contacting get in touch basically with what's happening in the battle and the war, because they think they've reached the safety of this shelter at this point. They don't think they have to worry too much about Palpatine, so they leave him with the 4 Jedi, not realizing that the place has been infiltrated. The gunship they communicating from is basically the ship that was infiltrated with the Grievous, who had been this entire time sneaking up behind the mag train. Everything he did was basically selling the idea that he was operating from this gunship, when in reality, from the very beginning of his arrival, he'd been operating from the Republic ship itself. So I like that even on that level, he's infiltrating them and planning ahead in one step. And even the reader, even as it's presented, we buy it the way the Jedi are seeing it. But at the same time, we also buy when it's ultimately revealed that he was from the gunship. We accept that makes sense. It's not just a throwaway. Oh, by the way, this was the thing I did at the last minute. It was always the plan, which I enjoy. But yeah, they basically blown up and they're incapacitated briefly and distracted while all this is going on. So when Mace arrives, they are here and they are alive, which I appreciate, given the fact that Shakti's a favourite of mine.
Well,
it does unfortunately cut out the scene where. It does unfortunately cut out the scene where she fights an entire army of Magna Guards on her own.
Yeah, very true.
It's a bummer.
Presumably that's where this would have happened.
Yeah.
In different circumstances. So Mace arrives, talks to them, gets a brief on what happened effectively, and they immediately head off to try and chase Palpatine down in Grievous's shuttle that's been just taken off. Where they also have the revelation of, apparently Grievous now has all of our security codes. That's fun. They're now fully aware of how far the betrayal climbs up the ladder of authority. Not that they didn't know that already, but this is the cemented proof.
The other thing I do like is Windu himself asking the question. The hijacked gunship had rescued Grievous after his fall from the maglev, Mace told himself, but had the fall been deliberate, part of an increasingly elaborate ruse, or had Grievous originally planned to abduct Palpatine from the train? And it's another little example of just how flexible Grievous himself is. The original plan was probably always just get into the bunker, but if a better opportunity arises, take it. And the train was, at least at first approximation, a better opportunity.
It also speaks again towards Mace's proactivity. He's thinking about these things. He's trying to work out what's going on. He's not just rolling with the punches. He's trying to think his way through the enemy's plan and work some steps ahead. It just happens to be that he's in a position where he can't succeed at that. I like that he's still trying. But yeah, then we get to chapter 52, jumping back to Anakin and Obi-Wan, where Obi-Wan kind of delivers the final Jedi platitude nail in the coffin for Anakin. Made up a little bit by a scene that comes later, but this is kind of the final thing. Anakin comes to him openly and says, you're my best friend. What should I do here? And he's like, well, the Force and Jedidom and la da da. And even immediately afterwards, he's like, oh, what did I just do? I just gave him another Jedi Palpatine. So and he's at least self-aware of the problem, but it's just instinct at this point. He's too heavily rooted in the transcendent Jedi that he is.
Yeah. But not so much that he can at least recognize it, which I think is at least a bone you can sort of character.
Obi-Wan's greatest strength and weakness is the fact that he truly is the quintessential Jedi with all of the baggage that entails.
He shouldn't have been the one training Anakin, in short. He was the wrong man for the job. Despite, personally they get really close and all that, but when it comes to the key moments that Anakin needs guidance, he instead fails to deliver that, and also relies on Anakin's own personal ability to sort through his problems, which just really doesn't exist on a philosophical level.
He probably would have served better, kind of like how Eddie Galileo was kind of like almost like a second master to him when he was being trained by Qui-Gon. Not quite full-on master student, but kind of like another voice he could go to for guidance.
The auntie.
Yeah, the auntie and the council, or the uncle if they're...
Or uncle in his case.
It's like, that's what Obi should have been. He shouldn't have been Anakin's master, he should have been Anakin's uncle. But instead, that position of metaphorical uncle was taken by Palpatine to the detriment of everyone.
And also the opportunity for it to be Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon as his kind of guiders was again an opportunity taken by the Sith. It's so poignant on the tragedy level, on the larger scale, because it was taken from him. That should have been how it went down, and it just didn't. Thanks to the Sith.
Yep.
Sort of inadvertently though, because at that stage, Palpatine was really gunning for Anakin.
Oh yeah, it wasn't planned, but like you said, everything to do with Anakin, they kind of benefited incidentally.
Yeah. I always felt like the whole council should have taken more proactive steps in guiding Anakin than they did.
Leave him with this one Jedi who, while a great Jedi, wasn't at the time.
Also, because in my head, like if I was writing Revenge of the Sith, there would have been a scene where what remained of the council would have been fighting godlike chosen one in the council chamber, and it would have been awesome. Like, I'm just saying, I wrote this scene in my head as a teenager.
Very cool.
With them turning their specific gifts back on them better than they could, because he's the chosen one. He's like, we taught him too much. Like, what I mean? Like, it would have been really.
That would have been very interesting.
Yeah, just saying.
Yeah, but the end of the scene leads us to the tight beam receiver of Anakin from Palpatine, because Grievous activated a beacon that sent this pre-recorded message of us, "Help me, Anakin Skywalker, you're my only hope." And that guy gives final confirmation of the battle happening, and Anakin gives the Obi-Wan the look, like, "I told you this was happening," and snaps at the civilian, or the military engineer. And that leads them to basically realizing that the battle is going on, and they need to get ready to get back immediately and start prepping the ships, which will lead us into the next scene for them, but that comes a bit later.
Yeah, well, Chapter 53, it's basically just an extension on them chasing Grievous's ship. Nothing too much eventful happens, although halfway through the chapter we cut back to Padme again.
Padme.
Padme.
The interesting...
Honestly, or Panda Bear, or whatever the hell her name is.
You're going to make that reference at some point. But
the interesting part of this scene is C-3PO accidentally met TC-16. Who is apparently now wandering about as another loose end.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy what they talk about.
Yeah, because he's like going, "Oh, and I know," because he obviously knows now that Palpatine is actually the Sith, and so he's confused by the fact that he was a Separatist droid, now he's a Republic droid, now they're both the same, and it's like, oh, and he's kind of wandering around C-3PO style, going, "Woe is me."
Yeah.
C-3PO hears this and talks to him, so now the Sith have that major loose end running around. It's like a droid. What's the word? Doomsayer.
Yeah, yep. He was basically telling C-3PO, "Hey, future's gonna be bleak, man. Good guys are gonna be bad guys are gonna be good." And he even tells C-3PO, if the opportunity ever comes to accept a mind wipe, take it.
Yeah,
he actually says that.
That's another instance of Lucino kind of throwing in a reference that, we know that C-3PO's mind gets wiped. Let's throw that in there. Why did he accept that? It's just he throws them in everywhere.
Yeah.
I really would like to find out what became of TC-16, because that seems like an interesting plot point to me. It's like, does Palpatine ever follow up on this, or does he not even know?
Well, I mean, presumably he let him walk out the room, because he wandered off down the tunnels
Right.
during that fight, right? I mean, that was another major oversight on Palpatine's part.
When Dine was killed, he was with that group.
It might be another example of Palpatine letting this happen because he figures that TC-16 will just turn into another red herring a la Count Dooku in Attack of the Clones. The Senate is controlled by a Sith Lord.
Yeah.
It's like this is another instance of, he'll just spew out the actual truth and no one will take him seriously. Great.
Yeah, I mean, to be
Crazy
fair,
droid.
Palpatine was a little
Crazy droid.
To be fair, Palpatine was also a little bit distracted by this point. I mean, that's presumably why he let slip on the dark side shroud and Yoda could detect him, because he was a bit stressed and otherwise occupied. I mean, rushing from moment to moment, like, I've got to get back upstairs before they find me. That time moment is just hilarious. But that jumps back
I'm just imagining Palpatine just drinking lots of coffee and having the shakes because it's like, I haven't slept for a week.
I'm too weak. But yeah, with that jumps, we're almost finished now. Wrapping it up now. Get back to chapter 54. Grievous is back on his flagship, escapes the Jedi in the shuttles. Oh, in his shuttle. Kills 2 more Jedi again that
pursue him on board the Invisible Hand and fight him in the hangar.
Yeah,
what's weird is like they talk about like these Jedi are like completely nameless, like unlike the ones we mentioned before, that we know absolutely nothing about them, except Grievous notes that they seemed a little bit more skilled than the ones he fought, which is just weird.
But at the end of the day, they're just Coleman Trevor Mark 2 and 3, throwing themselves into a battle that they have no hope of winning.
Well,
bravely stupid.
Yeah, it comes down to the idea of the whole tragedy of duty. You know, this particularly comes up in my mind when we talk about the 4 that fought him in the shelter. You know, these people, they have to do what they're doing, and they will do what they're doing because they understand duty and they understand the importance of their role in the universe. But the problem is that, and the why, you know, Grievous acknowledges them, is that it's futile. He knows they can't win. They probably know they can't win, but they still have to do it anyway. They still have to try because that's their job.
But he does kill them, and then he goes back to Palpatine and straps him into the general's quarters chair, and then
the veil comes up.
Yes, Palpatine
mind tricks Grievous. Palpatine mind tricks Grievous, which is another demonstration of Palpatine's power, because I think we can all agree that Grievous is a strong-willed being, which shows just how powerful Palpatine is. He can freaking mentally manipulate strong-willed people. It's, he can do that.
It wouldn't really make much sense to have a Jedi killer who's vulnerable to telepathy.
Yeah.
So the fact that Palpatine is able to actually mind trick him successfully is very impressive. In fact, it's probably up there with one of Palpatine's best, psychic feats, I'd say.
Yeah, it's one of his best Force feats.
Yeah.
So basically what happens is Grievous, after getting mind tricked, he goes onto the HoloNet and basically delivers his terrorist message out to the galaxy. Which that he has captured.
Worth mentioning as well is that his Palpatine's advisors, for some reason, decided to broadcast ahead of time and announce his abduction. I mean, okay, the Jedi were mind boggled by that, understandably. It's like, this is the middle of a battle. Why are you advertising something that could break morale? I mean, why? But this seals the deal on that one, and we get people sat there in the midst of the battle. It notes, people and the civilians of Coruscant watching this on the board.
I like how it actually highlights like everyone's reaction. We have the civilians' reaction. We have Padme. We have Gunray and the Separatist Council, and we have Yoda. It is interesting.
Yeah.
For once, the Separatist Council are a backslapping fellowship. Woo! We might actually win this.
Yeah, I love the fact that that's specifically the wording on the page. Like, they actually acknowledge it as that. It's brilliant. The visual of them going, "Yes, we're so close," having no idea what is about to happen to them in a day's time.
The fact in less than a week they're all gonna be dead.
Maybe not that soon, but yeah. Definitely. So yeah, his message broadcasting is generally pretty creepy, and it does really set up the it actually does kind of help set up the sort of bleak atmosphere that the populace is feeling at the start of Revenge of the Sith. So it's a nice way to set that up.
And the people on the ground, Bale kind of where's the Padme? People basically the senators acknowledging that this is the people watching it on the screen. It's happening around them, and they're still sat there watching it on the screen. It gives you a kind of ethos of how Coruscant is operating at the moment, even in this height of the war, as they're snapped out of their malaise. Padme's don't have to go into that in any more detail than we already have. And Yoda
pretty much that's all good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yoda
then we cut to
seeing 2 Jedi floating in space unpleasantly.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, and then we cut to the next chapter, chapter 55, which is 2 pages. It's literally just Dooku in his ship preparing to jump to the Invisible Hand so he could be ready for the duel in Revenge of the Sith. He does nothing too interesting here, except he does sort of start musing again about Anakin Skywalker and his place in the Sith Order. It's kind of like a condensed version of the conversation he'll eventually have with Palpatine at the start of the next book. So, I mean, nothing too significant overall.
Yeah, it highlights the kind of stupidity of him at this moment. This is where he's in full-on denial. I'm still important. This is still going to work. I mean, the way Sidious talks about him and says, I will intercede to save you from any embarrassment, and the fact that he actually believes that, he knows the rule of 2. He knows if Anakin is brought on, that means he's not going to be there anymore. And especially given the fact that he's just seen Anakin's display of power, so he knows probably if he's thinking even 2 steps ahead, he knows that Sidious has got his eye on him for that reason. So yeah, it kind of highlights where he is in his psyche is at the moment.
This is where I think the dark side has a sway over you. Like, it makes it easier for you to convince yourself of what you want to be true.
Yeah,
and that's in line with it. Like, he wants this to be true. Sidious is telling him it will be, and I'm the most powerful man in the galaxy, and you're on my side, and I care about you. So, I mean, it's easy for him, and he has a huge ego, the size of Coruscant. So, I mean...
It's the other thing is despite the fact that it's highlighting the stupidity of the moment, it fits his character perfectly, and the tragedy of his character too.
The other thing is that it kind of highlights another aspect of Dooku's delusion in that he thinks that Palpatine is on the same page as him and thinking that Anakin, for all his power, would not make a suitable Sith Lord because of his lack of control, and thinking, okay, we'll just recruit him as a Dark Jedi disciple that we keep on a short leash because, holy fuck, look at what he can do. We don't want this guy having actual Sith technique. But Palpatine's thinking, no, I want the most powerful apprentice.
Yeah. And we'll see where that leads pretty soon.
Yeah, Revenge of the Sith, next final chapter.
Next chapter, fittingly, it ends on Anakin and Obi-Wan getting into their starfighters and preparing to go on their last big adventure. And I do think this last chapter is written very well. It really does sell the camaraderie between the two, despite all the friction that we've also seen in this book. He's even Obi-Wan's like, no matter what, I will always have your back. And I think it's pretty tragic the way it's worded, because it tries to end on such a poignant note, but when you know where all this is going so soon, it's like
literally
crazy.
Hours away from Anakin's fall, effectively.
Yeah. It also leads very nicely into the opening chapter of Revenge of the Sith, where the Age of Heroes is discussed. It's almost like the last paragraph of this chapter leads into the first paragraph of the first chapter of Ep 3.
You could quite literally just turn a few pages and into the next book, and it flows perfectly.
Well, as appropriate as this is pretty much the opening crawl.
Yeah. I mean, in this. Yeah.
It's a testament to the cohesive nature of the for this particular trilogy as well. The fact that these 2 separate authors will be able to come together and write that, close knit a flowing passage. Even though obviously it was because they knew about the film, it's still the elegance in which they did it was worthy of note.
Well, even then, I mean, it's by no means perfect overall, but this particular last chapter, I think, is
that's what I mean. This last chapter
of the book's like stronger points when it comes to flowing into the rest of the series.
Absolutely, it's an excellent scene to cap off this one. And without too much more to say on it, unless we have any closing thoughts on the book as a whole, I think we can wrap up, guys.
Yeah, that caps it off pretty well.
Well, it's. In a lot of ways, Labyrinth of Evil is kind of the prequel trilogy as it should have been.
Mm-hmm.
Like this entire volume, the Dark Lord trilogy, is episode 3 we should have gotten, but Labyrinth of Evil specifically is basically what the prequel trilogy as a whole should have been, but wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Well, this should have been episode 2, pretty much. Like we discussed this before. Episode 2 should have been about the Clone Wars and setting up. Going in, more flawlessly to the end of the conflict, and I do think that's what this should have been. And if you look at through that lens, it fits just beautifully. Yeah. So it's a really really good thing in this book's favor, I think.
Yeah, the timeline would need to be extended and the circumstances changed to make that work. But in essence and what it's actually delivering on, I absolutely agree. Right, this should have been that.
But the thing is, like, if you think about it, episodes 1 and 2 are basically the same movie. It's the same plot. It's exactly like Padme's in trouble. The Jedi come to help. There's a droid army that they fight, and the Sith are plotting like a war. Like that's pretty much it. They could have skipped Attack of the Clones or just got into this. This could have been easily.
Attack of the Clones should have been episode 1. It should have started with the Clone Wars, with the Clone Wars being the plot of the prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
It's it's so many things that seem patently obvious. And I'm just like, how did George Lucas drop the ball? How did he miss that point? How did he not see this obvious thing?
That man is crazy. Like he's talented and can be thanked for a lot, and was a visionary in his time, was talented in his day, but I think he went nuts. Like, I'm just going to say that. I think you listen to him talk.
Quite possibly.
The man, he's literally said things like, at the end of the day, Attack of the Clones is R2-D2's story. Like, if you listen to the commentary, he says that at one point. Like, he's off his meds, he's off his medications.
But yeah, he's always been the idea man.
What can
He's
you
not
do?
been the executor, as far as I'm concerned. He was good at that in his heyday, but overall, that's what he represents for the Star Wars.
And I don't hate him. I don't hate George Lucas, but he mystifies me. I'll say that.
He did not get better with age.
We'll go into that in further detail when we get to the actual films themselves, I'm sure, and the commentaries and
overall. And it'll probably come up a bit more in Revenge of the Sith, because we will be reviewing the direct adaptation of what could have been his masterwork, but instead just turned into something adequate.
Yeah.
But next on the list. Yeah. But at the end of the day, we all highly recommend this book, even if despite its flaws and despite it being arguably the weakest of the trilogy, it is still a very solid piece, and we highly recommend you check it out. It is a must for any fan of the era, especially.
Completely agree, as is the entire trilogy. This is a good starting point. It's the weakest part, but that doesn't mean it's weak by any measure. It's it just happens to be standing up to the following two books.
It's like Kit Fisto is a lesser swordsman than Mace Windu, but that doesn't change the fact that Kit Fisto is still the reigning master of Shi-Cho.
Absolutely. So with that all said, I think we can wrap up. I am Rutty4, and I still don't have an outro.
Jansarai 1 signing off.
Evanova95. We hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys later.
Gridget 91. I'm very tired. We suffer for this, for you. We work for it. Do you know what time it is right now? Anyway.
Channel the dark side. Summon your demons.
I hope you guys enjoyed. And the nice thing is, I know for a fact you guys enjoyed. If we have great viewers.
We do indeed. Looking forward to seeing you guys in the comment section here and next time. Goodbye.